A simple teacher boards Billionaire's jet by mistake. Now she's on a romantic trip in Italy with him. Clara Bennett rubbed her eyes, trying to blink away the exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. Her worn canvas bag bounced at her side as she rushed through JFK Airport's bustling terminal. She'd checked her watch 3 times in the past minute, her heart pounding with urgency. She was dangerously close to missing her flight. It wasn't a luxurious escape or some dream vacation, just a few days to visit a college friend in San Diego. But for Clara, it was her first real break in nearly 3 years. If she missed this flight, there might not be another chance. She had just dropped her younger sister, Lily, off at their aunt's house in Queens. A simple act, but a heavy one. 2 years had passed since their parents' fatal car accident, and Clara had been playing the role of guardian, sister, and emotional anchor ever since. As a primary school teacher in Brooklyn, she spent her days nurturing her students and her nights worrying about bills, lesson plans, and her sister's college dreams, things most people her age didn't carry. This past week had been especially draining. The school hosted a book fair, and Clara was in charge of coordinating it. She'd built display stands, read stories to every grade, and hauled crates of books up from the basement. Her voice was hoarse from reading aloud, her back ached. But she still smiled when a student handed her a handmade card that read, "Ms. Clara is the best teacher in the universe." Clara passed through security and tightened her grip on her phone screen, where her boarding pass read, "Gate 4B." But her eyes blurred. The signs all seemed to blur together, and her mind, foggy from sleep deprivation, couldn't keep up. She'd been running on fumes for weeks, staying up late preparing lesson plans, waking early to care for Lily. 2 hours of sleep wasn't nearly enough. She spotted a small group near a side entrance marked West Forum Private Air Terminal. She paused. Her instincts overrode logic. Maybe the gate changed, she thought. Maybe this is it. A uniformed woman approached her with a polite smile. "Miss Bellamy, we've been expecting you." Clara blinked. The aircraft is ready. Right this way." She hesitated for half a second, then followed. She could ask questions later. Explain later. Right now, she just wanted to board a plane, sit down, and disappear from everything weighing her down. Clara was led down a quieter corridor, far removed from the chaos of the main terminal. Everything here was immaculate. Polished floors, soft lighting, sleek silence. It felt like she had stepped into a world that wasn't meant for someone like her. The aircraft door opened, and Clara inhaled sharply. Inside was a private jet cabin, lined with cream leather seats, rich walnut panels, and lighting so soft it felt like walking into a luxury spa. A flight attendant greeted her and gently took her bag before she could react. "No need to worry, Miss Bellamy. Mr. West said you might be running late." Clara opened her mouth to correct the mistake, but before she could speak, a calm voice called out from the rear of the cabin. "So you decided to join after all?" A man sat near the window, his back initially to her. When he turned, Clara stopped in her tracks. He looked to be in his early 30s, with sharply defined features, neatly cropped black hair, and contemplative gray eyes. His white shirt was simple, but impeccably tailored, like he had stepped out of a fashion editorial. "I'm so sorry. I think I boarded the wrong plane," Clara said, her voice faltering. He raised an eyebrow and set down a notebook. "You're not Sophie Bellamy?" "No, I'm Clara Bennett." Silence hung in the air for a beat. Then, unexpectedly, he let out a soft chuckle, not mocking, just genuinely amused. "So not only did you board the wrong plane, you managed to get past a security system that costs millions to maintain." Clara blushed, her voice trembling with embarrassment. "I'm really sorry. I thought the gate had changed. I just flew in from New York to San Diego. My flight was delayed by over 3 hours, and I barely got any sleep last night. I'm so exhausted. I can't even think straight anymore." He shook his head, still smiling. No harm done. I'm Julian West." Clara swallowed. Julian West. The name was familiar, too familiar. "And I'm afraid," he added, glancing toward the window, "we've already taken off." Outside, the clouds were thickening as the plane climbed. Destination? Venice? Clara nearly jumped out of her seat. Venice? As in Italy? Julian nodded, like he was announcing a lunch reservation. "I was planning to spend the weekend there. Don't worry. Once we land, I'll have you on a flight to San Diego." She sank back down, her thoughts spinning. She wanted to laugh, or cry, or call someone, except she had no idea what to even say. "Are you okay?" Julian asked, his voice tinged with concern. I don't know," Clara admitted. "I just wanted a break, a few days to breathe. And now I'm halfway across the world with a stranger." "Sometimes," Julian said softly, "the trips we don't plan are the ones that take us exactly where we need to go." Clara turned to him. For the first time, she saw more than the luxury, more than the tailored clothes and private jet. There was something quiet in his eyes, something aching, something familiar. Venice greeted them with a soft afternoon light and a breeze that carried hints of salt and old stone. Clara stepped off the private jet with shaky legs, still unsure if she was dreaming. She couldn't quite believe she was standing in Europe, in a city she'd only ever seen in storybooks and old postcards. "The car is waiting outside," Julian said as they exited the private terminal. Everything moved too quickly, too smoothly, and it all felt far removed from the world Clara knew. A sleek wooden boat waited for them at the private dock. As they boarded, the driver nodded respectfully and called Julian Signor West in a deep Italian accent. Clara sat quietly, clutching her bag. The city glided past them, framed in rippling canals and red-tiled roofs. Flower boxes adorned windows, and bell towers peeked from distant islands. Everything looked like it belonged in a forgotten dream. The hotel sat just beyond Piazza San Marco, its white stone facade gleaming in the sunset. A hotel staff member stepped out as they arrived, taking Clara's bag before she could protest. "This is your room," Julian said gently, motioning for the staff to escort her upstairs. "Private? Quiet enough to breathe? I'm on the same floor, but a few doors down." Clara hesitated, unsure. "I know this wasn't your plan," Julian continued, "but if you want to rest here tonight, I'll arrange a flight to San Diego first thing in the morning." One night, in a city she had once only dreamed of, after 3 years of just surviving. "All right, one night," she said, softly but firmly. Julian nodded, and something like relief passed through his eyes. Her room was silent and breathtaking. A balcony opened over water kissed by the last orange rays of the sun. On the desk sat a basket of fresh fruit, a single white rose, and a small card that read, "Relax, just breathe." Clara stood by the railing, sea breeze tugging at her hair. For the first time in ages, she wasn't thinking about bills, lesson plans, or worry. Just Venice and herself. At exactly 7 p.m., a message from Julian lit up her phone. "If you're hungry, the rooftop restaurant has incredible risotto. My treat." But no pressure. She looked at her modest cotton dress in the closet. It would do. Nothing about today had followed the rules, and she was past the point of pretending. The rooftop restaurant offered a sweeping view of the city, glowing beneath the sunset. Julian was already seated, 2 glasses of chilled white wine on the table. He stood when he saw her, pulling out her chair with unforced grace. "Thanks for not running away," he said, his voice more serious than before. Clara gave a small smile as she sat. "Maybe I needed an unplanned journey too," she replied. Dinner unfolded gently. They spoke about little things, favorite books, places they'd dreamed of visiting, and how teaching both drained and fulfilled Clara. As dessert arrived, Julian looked at her. "You know," he said quietly, "this is the first time Venice has felt beautiful to me since my brother died." Clara didn't say anything, but in that moment she knew. They were both carrying grief, and both searching for something they hadn't yet found words for. Dinner ended in a warm, companionable silence. There was nothing left to prove, not because they had run out of things to say, but because the most meaningful words had already passed between them in the quiet weight of being seen. Julian rose from his seat before Clara could, reaching for her coat. His voice was soft, more invitation than request. "If you're free tomorrow morning, I'd love to show you parts of Venice most tourists never see. The little corners only locals know. Nothing fancy. Just a day that might be worth remembering." Clara met his gaze. There was something patient and sincere in his expression, like he wasn't pushing, just hoping. She didn't answer right away, only nodded slightly and smiled. "I'll think about it." Back in her room, Clara stepped out onto the balcony. The city below lay quiet beneath the moonlight, the canal glimmering like a mirror painted in silver. Everything was still. It felt like the world had stopped spinning, just for a moment. She leaned against the railing and sighed. By now, she should have been in San Diego, laughing over cheap tacos, reminiscing about college memories with her friend. She should have been back in her safe, predictable world. But here, something was unfolding, something unnamed and unfamiliar, but impossible to ignore. She had spent so long being responsible, so long keeping herself from drifting off course, from dreaming too much, from believing that the unexpected could be beautiful. Her phone buzzed softly. Clara picked it up, hesitated a moment, then typed, "I'll come with you. Tomorrow morning." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, and as she turned back to look at the water shimmering below, she realized, for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel trapped between two worlds. She was standing at the edge of something entirely new. The next morning, Clara woke to soft light filtering through sheer white curtains. She opened her eyes to a room so quiet it felt unfamiliar. No alarm clock, no Lily calling from the kitchen, no car horns from the narrow Brooklyn street. There was only Venice, and a real sleep, undisturbed, unbroken by anxiety. She sat up and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, the canal shimmered with morning light, like golden silk stretching into the distance. From afar came the gentle sound of oars gliding through water, slow, dreamlike. On the floor, a note had been slid under the door. "I'll be at the cafe downstairs at 9 Dias. No pressure. Julian." Clara smiled, a real smile, effortless. She chose the only simple dress she'd brought, a pale blue one with a square neckline, soft as her mood this morning. When she came down to the cafe beneath the hotel, Julian was already there. He wore a light gray shirt with the sleeves rolled up, reading something on his phone. When he looked up and met her gaze, the faint smile that crossed his lips made Clara's heart skip a beat. Not obvious, not deliberate, but enough for her to feel something shifting. "Good morning," he said, standing to pull out her chair. "Good morning," she replied, sitting across from him. Julian looked at her for a few seconds, longer than usual. There was something about Clara that made him feel at ease, as if after years of standing among gleaming buildings and endless meetings, he was finally allowed to pause. She wore no makeup, her hair tied simply, her dress unbranded. But when she smiled and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, Julian felt something stir inside him from the quiet intimacy of it. Strong Italian coffee, crisp air, the sounds of footsteps and water lapping gently against the docks. They stepped into the second day, one neither of them had planned, yet neither wanted to miss. Julian took her through narrow cobblestone alleys where Venice revealed itself not in glossy tourist facades, but in its raw, weathered soul. They stopped by a hidden old bookstore behind a wooden door where the scent of paper and ink felt like stepping into another era. When the shopkeeper found out Clara was a teacher, she gifted her an old Italian comic book with worn edges. "For your students," she said in broken English. Julian smiled at Clara's moved expression. He didn't say anything, just looked at her gently, as if committing that moment to memory. Clara felt it, that gaze. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at her that way, not as a burdened woman, not as the reliable one, but simply as herself. They ate gelato by the canal. Julian told her about Lucas, his older brother, the co-founder of West Forum. "He was the light," Julian said quietly, "and I'm just the one trying to keep the lamp from going out." "Do you really believe that?" Clara asked. Julian looked at her. "I don't know. After Lucas died, I built more things. Buildings, spaces, cities. But I didn't find myself in any of it." As Clara bent to grab a napkin, Julian watched her discover the salted caramel flavor with wide-eyed delight. For the first time in a long time, he felt joy, simply because the person next to him was enjoying something so simple. Clara noticed him watching. She didn't blush. She just smiled, a calm, warm smile, as if allowing herself to be truly seen. That afternoon, they had lunch at a small restaurant with worn wooden tables. Clara ordered a simple Italian pasta dish. Surprisingly delicious. When she exclaimed at the rich, buttery flavor, Julian laughed. "The owner's a friend of mine," he said. "Used to be a 3-star Michelin chef in Milan, but gave it all up to return here because Venetian pasta tastes better." "You seem to know a lot of interesting people," Clara teased. Julian looked at her, his eyes serious. "Actually, I'm not close to many. I have business cards, connections, but real friends, very few." Clara fell silent, not out of surprise, but because she understood. She too had smiled, had chatted all day at school, but when night came, it was just her in her apartment, alone with responsibilities and silence. When they returned to the hotel, the sun was beginning to set. In the quiet hallway, Julian stopped in front of the elevator. "Clara?" he called softly as a breeze. She turned. "Thank you for today," he said. "I'm used to quiet lunches and purposeful meetings, but today, I just got to be me." Clara looked at him. In the dim light of dusk, his face softened, matching the tenderness of his words. She smiled. No words needed. And in that moment, Julian realized, maybe, just maybe, he didn't want her to leave tomorrow morning. That evening, back in her room, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat on the balcony, watching the reflections shimmer across the canal below. Something heavy sat in her chest, a quiet weight of questions she hadn't dared to ask. She opened her phone and hesitated. Just a quick search. Or so she told herself. Julian West. In less than a second, dozens of headlines filled her screen. Julian West, the visionary of modern design. Billionaire architect reshaping the skyline. The man behind New York's most iconic buildings. Clara froze. Image after image showed him beside gleaming towers, prestigious awards, political leaders, global CEOs. There was nothing ordinary about the man who had shared risotto with her under the Venetian sky. She closed her phone, gripping it tightly. The dream had slipped, and reality came rushing in. The next morning, Julian texted her. "Walk? No pressure. We don't even have to talk." She didn't reply, but at the agreed time, she came down. They walked silently through the winding alleyways along the water. No words passed between them until Clara stopped outside a quiet cafe. "You're Julian West," she said, staring out at the canal. "I Googled you." Julian sighed, nodding. "I figured you would. You let me think you were just normal." "Because with you I was," he said softly. You were the first person in years who didn't see me as something to use." She turned to look at him. His gray eyes didn't flinch or hide, just truth. Clara was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "One more day, but only if you're honest." Julian gave a faint smile, asking nothing more. They kept walking. As twilight crept across the city, they passed over an old stone bridge. The world around them quieted. Clara slowed her pace, then suddenly spoke, eyes fixed ahead. "My parents died in a car accident 2 years ago. My sister was 15. Since then, I've been everything. Sister, mother, adult in a house that forgot how to laugh." Her voice caught, but she didn't cry. "I don't teach for the money. It's barely enough. But when I see a kid's eyes light up because they finally understand something, I feel like maybe I still matter, even when life feels like one long, quiet sacrifice." Julian didn't interrupt. He didn't say, "I understand." He didn't offer comfort in words. He simply reached out and gently took her hand in his. They walked the rest of the way back in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need fixing. The next morning, Julian knocked on Clara's door earlier than usual. He wore a light linen shirt and held a steaming cappuccino in one hand. "Have you ever been to Torcello?" he asked, as if inviting her on a walk around the block. Clara frowned. "Torcello?" "It's a quiet little island. Not many people go there. I have an old villa out that way. No Wi-Fi, no schedule. Just a kitchen, a garden, and silence." Clara accepted the cup. "You mean today?" Julian nodded. "If you're still willing to stay one more day, I'd like to spend it in the quietest place I know." "E.T.?" She paused for a moment, then nodded. A small boat cut across the lagoon. Venice faded behind them, replaced by long reeds and patches of still water. Torcello appeared like a forgotten memory. Red brick homes, a lone bell tower, and a stone path leading to a villa partially hidden behind trees. Julian's villa wasn't grand. It was rustic, with old stone walls, wooden doors, and bougainvillea climbing the archways. Clara stepped inside and instantly felt lighter. In the kitchen, Julian pulled out olive oil, dry pasta, and fresh vegetables from the garden. Clara helped him cook, moving together like they had done this a dozen times before. "The last time I cooked with someone," Julian said, chuckling, "was probably with my mom, when I was a kid trying to be a chef." Clara smiled. "The last time someone cooked for me was also my mom, my 17th birthday." A quiet settled between them, comfortable, honest. After lunch, they sat in the backyard beneath olive trees. Clara took a seat with a glass of white wine. Julian sat opposite, the sun casting gentle shadows across his tired features. "I used to dream of writing children's books," Clara said, almost as if tossing a pebble into the sea. Julian looked up. "Why didn't you?" "Life. I had to work, raise my sister. I thought dreams were for people with time and money." "No," Julian said, gently but firmly. "Dreams are what keep us alive. If you're still thinking about it, it's not dead." Clara didn't speak. Somehow, from him, it didn't sound cliché. Julian spoke of the years after Lucas died, how he stopped sketching, stopped designing, stopped seeing beauty in the world. "I built things, but nothing felt alive. Everything turned into numbers and deadlines, and I was lost in soulless drafts." Clara nodded slowly. "I get that. Teaching's like that too. When it's just schedules and classroom management, people forget the magic of a child reading their first word. Silence lingered, not awkward, not strained, just present." By late afternoon, the garden glowed in golden light. Clara stood and walked to the hammock. Julian followed, and she didn't step back. "I'm not sure I'm someone worth trusting," he murmured. "I'm not sure I'm someone worth choosing," she replied, her eyes steady on his. The world went still, so quiet, she could hear leaves drift to the earth. And then they kissed. No urgency, no firework dramatics, just the gentle meeting of two tired hearts finally letting down their guard. A simple kiss, but deeper than any words they could say. The next morning, Clara woke early. The villa was still and quiet, filled only with the sound of birdsong and sunlight trickling through the wooden shutters. She glanced around the room. It looked exactly the same as if the night before had been a dream. A handwritten note sat on the table. Out picking oranges. Coffee's in the kitchen. J. Clara wrapped a light shawl around her shoulders and stepped out onto the porch. Julian stood beneath a small orange tree, gathering ripe fruit, his hair tousled by the morning dew. He looked up when he saw her and smiled, saying nothing, as though silence was the most respectful way to hold the moment. After breakfast, they returned to Venice. The boat ride was quiet, each of them watching the water slip past like pages of a story they didn't want to end. No one said it aloud, but both knew. Clara would be leaving today. At the hotel, her bags had already been brought down. Julian handed her a plane ticket back to New York and a folded piece of paper. On it was a pencil sketch, a quiet corner of Venice, a bench under a tree, and a girl reading a book. "I drew it last night," he said, resting his hand gently over the sketch. "Because that's how I see you, not just in this world, but in your own world. Still, honest, full." Clara stared at the drawing, eyes stinging. She folded it gently and tucked it into her bag. At the airport lounge, they stood side by side, but no one rushed to say goodbye. Clara watched people move around them, everyone with destinations, plans, and clarity. But she wasn't so sure of anything anymore. "Clara," Julian began, his voice low and real, "I'm not sure I can offer you an easy life. I'm busy, a bit chaotic, and sometimes not the easiest person to read. But," he paused, then added, "but I know that when I'm with you, everything feels quieter, lighter, and more real than anything else I've known." She smiled faintly. "You don't have to promise anything, Julian." "I'm not promising," he replied. "Just hoping that this won't be the last time." Clara nodded slowly. There were no guarantees, but also nothing had closed. She walked toward security. Just before disappearing through the gate, she turned back for one last glance. Julian was still there, not moving forward, not calling after her, just holding her in his gaze, not possessive, but full of quiet longing. Clara returned to Brooklyn on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Nothing had changed, the subway was still packed, the corner bodega still stayed open late, and the small apartment she shared with her sister still sat on the third floor, up 47 creaky steps. Lily opened the door at the sound of footsteps in the hall. "You're back? Why so soon?" she asked, eyes wide with surprise and relief. Clara pulled her into a hug. "I missed home," she replied simply. But deep down, she knew. It wasn't just home she'd missed. It was the version of herself that dared to feel again. The next morning, Clara returned to school. The children swarmed her with hugs, unfinished stories, and crayon-covered cards. She smiled, genuinely, softly. The rush, the fatigue, the weight. It felt lighter. As she taught, she noticed she was listening differently, seeing more. The furrowed brow of a child struggling to read. The pure joy in another finally forming a full sentence. And she remembered something Julian once told her. "You do something most people forget. Make others believe they matter." That evening, Clara sat by the window, her laptop on her knees. She opened a blank Word document and typed the first line. "The fox who lost his voice." A story she'd thought about for years. This time, she didn't close the file. Sometimes her phone lit up, a message from Julian. Not too many, not too few, just enough. designing a library in Ghana. Remember you mentioned classrooms without light? Sending you sketches inspired by a teacher I once met. Clara opened the designs, wide windows, outdoor reading nooks, low tables built for small hands. She smiled, a small smile, but a real one. No big declarations, no promises, no pressure. But inside her, something had begun to grow, quietly, like a sprout after the rain. It was a rainy Friday night in New York. Clara had just turned on the stove to reheat a pot of soup when she heard a knock at the door, soft yet certain. She hesitated for a few seconds before opening it. And there he was, Julian, soaked from the rain, holding a bouquet of yellow tulips, his eyes carrying something achingly familiar. As if all the winters they'd spent talking through screens, all the nights she'd fallen asleep listening to his voice from across the world, had led to this moment. "Clara," he said quietly, "I couldn't wait any longer." She didn't speak. She didn't need to. In that instant, Clara stepped forward and threw her arms around him, as if the entire world had just collapsed into this embrace. Julian held her tightly, burying his face into her rain-damp hair. "I missed you so much it hurt to breathe." Clara let out a soft sob, her cheek pressed against his shoulder. "I thought you were still in Zurich." "I took the earliest flight I could," he murmured, his voice low and steady, like a dream finally becoming real. They stood there in the narrow hallway, under warm yellow light and the sound of soft rain tapping against the windows. No explanations, no questions, just each other. When they finally pulled apart, Julian sheepishly held up the tulips. "I brought a bit of sunshine for you, even if there isn't any outside today." Clara laughed through her tears. "I don't need sunshine. I need you." "Come in," she said softly. Julian stepped into the small apartment, glancing around quietly. A photo of the two sisters on the table, a tiny cactus by the window, the faint scent of lemon lingering in the air. From the bedroom, Lily poked her head out. "Sis, who's at the door?" When she saw Julian, she stepped out, her eyes lighting up with pure curiosity. "I'm Lily," she said, extending her hand, voice serious. "Who are you?" Julian shook her hand, smiling. "I'm Julian. I brought flowers, and I might be a surprise dinner guest." Lily tilted her head. "Are you my sister's boyfriend?" Clara gave a tiny cough behind them, and Julian tried not to laugh. Lily crossed her arms, glanced at Clara, who was blushing and pretending to rearrange the plates, then back at Julian. I'll be observing your interview tonight. If you make her laugh 3 times, I might give you bonus points." Julian bowed formally. "I'll do my best." Dinner was simple: chicken soup, crusty bread, and salad, but laughter filled the space. Lily told school stories while Julian shared how he once got lost in a Bangkok night market and had to use Google Translate to find his way back. "And I accidentally said, 'I am a duck who cannot swim,'" Julian ended, and Lily laughed so hard she nearly choked on her juice. Clara sat back for a moment, watching them both, her sister, the only family she had left, and Julian, once a stranger, now sitting at her kitchen table like he had always belonged there. From time to time, she and Julian caught each other's gaze across the candlelit table. No words, just looks that said everything. After dinner, Lily raised a hand. 2 big laughs, 1 chuckle. You've passed round 1. Julian tilted his head. "Do I get a prize?" Lily smirked. "My sister will walk you to the door, and not slam it." Julian turned to Clara. "Totally worth it." She didn't respond, just smiled, softly, sincerely, and in her eyes was something that said, "Maybe we start here." Their love didn't begin with grand declarations. It started with late-night texts, midday calls without a reason, simple dates, grocery shopping, cooking together, walking through Brooklyn under autumn leaves. Julian didn't bring expensive gifts. He brought hot coffee on mornings Clara was too busy to brew her own. He helped her fix up the reading nook in her classroom, hanging quotes she loved. He stayed close, quietly, gently. And Clara, still the dedicated teacher, still Lily's big sister, was different now. She allowed herself to love. No second-guessing, no defenses. Just love. Peaceful, steady. A year passed like that. One May afternoon, Julian asked Clara to leave school early. "I want to take you somewhere," he said. Clara didn't ask questions. She trusted him, always had. They drove to a quiet beach where the golden afternoon sun kissed the sea. As Clara stepped out, she froze. A soft path of rose petals lay across the sand, leading to a circle of white candles and fresh blooms. In the center stood Julian, in a simple suit, holding a small velvet box. "Clara," he said as she approached, "I used to think my life needed to follow a perfect plan. And then you came, like the sweetest kind of mistake. And for the first time, I don't care about plans, as long as you're in it." He knelt, opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, engraved with, "Still, honest, full." "Will you marry me?" Clara didn't cry. She just smiled, that same warm, quiet smile that had moved him from the start. "Yes," she said. They had a small wedding in the garden behind an old library. No elaborate gown, no celebrity guests, just close friends, fresh flowers, sweet pastries, and late summer sunshine. Lily was the only bridesmaid. Julian's mother, who had been distant for years, held Clara long and whispered, "Thank you for bringing him back to himself." Julian moved to New York afterward. He still designed, still traveled, but their new apartment, small but full of light, was where he always came home first. 2 years later, on a bright spring morning, Clara gave birth to twin girls, Nora and Elia. Nora had her father's gray eyes. Elia had her mother's dimples. Both had smiles that erased every tired bone. At night, in their little kitchen, the baby giggles, clinking dishes, and soft jazz blended into one quiet symphony. Julian cradled Elia. Clara rocked Nora to sleep. He looked at his wife, bathed in the soft kitchen light, and knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, simple, honest, and full.